my name's Denis Wood, and I'm the executive chairman of a company called KGL Resources. Now, KGL Resources has got a couple of exploration areas, one in particular at Jervois, where we've been focused on that for the 11 years of our ownership and 7 years since I joined the company. And there are plenty of minerals types there, including lead, zinc, but in the last 7 years, because of our belief with respect to where copper might head, we've just been focusing on the copper. And we've now built a mine life of over 10 years with an average grade of just over 2%. And we've got all our licenses necessary to get going. So now it's just a factor of putting the process together in such a way that we can get it constructed, get it operating in the current climate.
Denis, thank you very much for the introduction. Good to see you again. We last spoke a couple of months ago, and you, in late 2022, had put out a feasibility study showing, as you said, over 10 years of mine life and an NPV of $240 million Aussie. And the work plan for 2023 was to do some infill drilling at the Reward open pit, which is where you're going to be starting your mining operations and kind of continuing to drill the extensions at the underground ore bodies. You were struggling a bit with slow drilling, and you're dealing with the shortage of labour in the Australian market, and all of this was with a view to get everything nailed down, to do all of the final detailed work on the project so that you could be pretty much ready to go for financing, as I understood it, in Q4, at some stage in Q4, to kind of get all the loose ends finally kind of tied down so that the company would be ready for financing. We will come into the detail of the project, but what I'd like to hear from you, if you could kind of share your thoughts, please, and just kind of let's just take a step back from Jervois, and if you could just kind of talk a bit about where the resources sector is in Australia, particularly with reference to the kind of the shortage of labour. I think that'd be, and from what I see at my end, is also this kind of great split between the juniors, which are unfunded, and the mining companies, which are short of personnel. So your thoughts, please, on the overall resources sector in Australia.
Well, obviously the big companies are there and proceeding quite well, and the smaller ones, they're everywhere at the moment, and making progress and financing it is a difficult thing in the current climate. However, one of our advantages is, like the last cap raising I did, the share price was down ridiculously low at 12 cents. And as I would always do with everything I've managed to run publicly, I did it as a rights issue rather than a placement. And what I can say in our case, that the majority of the shareholders are very supportive and will continue to support our exploration. You are correct. This year's program was to do the infill drilling at Reward open cut, and with one of the rigs, and the other rig was to do some looking at expanding some of the others, particularly Marshall and Rockface. And you're correct, the first 6 months, unfortunately, we probably only got about a third of the drilling done that we needed. However, things have just changed. I've changed the drilling company in June, and we've got a new drilling company there now, and things are progressing much better. The infill drilling at Reward has gone quite well, and in fact in the quarterly report you would have seen some results that had come out. So we are now back on our program, and that is to get the infill drilling. The infill drilling will be okay. It's a matter of, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but getting finance. Quite often the finance companies want the JORC for the first 2 years or thereabouts to be measured, actual real, not just indicated. So fundamentally in the reserve statement, basically most of it's indicated. We've taken it from inferred to indicated. Now we've got to take it the first couple of years of mining to measure, which Bellbird is already, the open cut's already measured, and it's just a matter of probably another 6 weeks of drilling, and we should have Reward open cut finished.
Yeah, I saw some results from late June. You published those as well. Kind of the reward numbers look good. You kind of 9.6 meters at 2.6% copper and 14.7 meters at 2.5% copper, and these are relatively shallow, kind of 110 or 130 meters below surface. So confirming what you had anticipated, really.
Yeah, well, the infill drilling's going quite well.
Good. And tell me about the deeper drilling. You say you changed the drilling companies. When we last spoke, you were saying it's about a month per hole. Is that still the case?
Oh, the deep holes at Rockface, for instance, that we're now down to about 1 kilometre. Yeah, they would take a month or thereabouts. However, what we can do is daughter holes off when we drill that, let's say 1 kilometre down or thereabouts. We then can take a number of daughter holes off that one. So the first hole might take a month, but then they get drilled daughter holes off that with wedges, and it takes far less.
And you're still using downhole EM as your key exploration tool?
Certainly for these deeper underground ones, it's extremely positive with respect to the results coming from the drilling and the downhole EM matching. In fact, if you were to look at our Rockface in the feasibility study, I believe it's there, but if you look at Rockface's downhole EMs and mine plan, they're almost identical.
And just stepping back from the drilling, in your quarterly, you talk about that the company's looking to hire a finance director and a CEO. Talk to me a little bit about that, please.
Okay, well, it's building a project like this is a lot of work, and we currently don't have the numbers in the team to be able to do it. And what I'm desperately looking for is someone to run the company, be the CEO. The fact is, my big successes have been cleaning up public companies that were going broke or building private companies from scratch. Now, building this company from scratch will be going forward would be relatively easy, I would think. But managing the company and being a public company, I'm inundated with work that I'd rather have someone else look after. And you mentioned the quarterly, but there's 4 of them. There's annual reports. I can go on and on and on with the obligations with a public company. And we desperately need to get a team in to be able to run it as a public company, and that way I can address some of the more fundamental issues with respect to getting it developed.
It's certainly there are many advantages of having of running a private company because you don't have the same regulatory and the same scrutiny and the same amount of paperwork to do. It's not easy finding people though. Even though that the junior sector is underfunded, there are not many qualified mine builders and company operators out there, particularly that are willing to work in the middle of the bush. How's your dialogue going in terms of that?
Well, it's interesting. We're finding people. It's just a matter of making sure we get the right one. But you're right, it is difficult, and even recently, beginning of this year, I've always employed my geologists straight out of uni and trained them and worked with them, and that includes when I was in America, working in America. And I cannot believe that so many universities in Australia are not doing geology anymore because there's no people wanting to do them. So my 2 new geologists, I've still got the 2 that I've been training for 4 and 5 years. They've been advancing and doing really well, like superbly well. But to help them out with the logging and the drilling and stuff, the routine work, I've had to bring 2 new geologists in from the Philippines. So I think that's going to be a standard practice in Australia for the next generation or two until we start getting people to focus on mining and other construction and type jobs at the university courses and start getting people back to the reality. I cannot imagine a place like Australia not encouraging people to go and do geology at university, but it's a fact of life. And for the first time in my life in Australia, I brought in geologists from overseas, and they're going really, really well.
Good. When you looked to the kind of the completion of the project, let's say you resolve the CEO of FD conundrum, and that you're fully staffed. It sounds as if you're going to be ready for financing kind of Q4 this year or early next year. And the capex is around $300 million. Typical debt equity split is probably going to be something in the region of 50-50. Does that all tally with what you're kind of thinking internally?
I'd say what you're saying there is realistic. We're obviously looking at various ways around of reducing the capital as much as we can and reducing the labour as much as we can. But a lot's going to depend on what the reality of the copper price really is as well. And obviously the projections are it's going to climb out the roof all over the place. And even now the American government's got very aggressive with where the importance of copper and where it's got to be and coming from. They've been quite public lately about the more need for copper. So once that starts to pick up, things will change a fair dramatically for us with respect to being able to get some of these other people as well.
And sorry, when you talk about the US getting behind copper, you mean that they've added it? Are you referring to the fact that they've added it to the critical minerals list now?
Yeah, they're really pushing copper into the critical minerals as we speak. And funny enough, the Northern Territory government's put copper in the critical minerals, and I'm actually preparing a document now because the federal government is looking at it again, and I'm actually preparing a document as we speak to send to as part of the federal government regime to get there, because government assistance, which is something I've never relied on, but in a case like this could make a big difference, particularly when it comes to hunting people.
And in the form of a grant, is that what you're looking? I mean, could they potentially contribute money to the project, or is it kind of a tax break?
Well, that would always be black and white help. That would be good, but in the first instance, is having the government put their hand up and sort of support it will help us actually start to have more effect on people.
Yeah. And you also talked about the copper price. You said the copper price will help the project, but the copper price won't change any of the cost numbers. You'll still have to raise the $300 million. You'll still have to the debt equity split is likely to still be there. You're still going to have to raise $150 million of equity. How do you see the copper price helping, or is it just going to? Do you hope that a rising copper price will just change the current share price to minimise dilution? Is that what you're
most
definitely?
One thing I do know, as I said, my most success at building mines has been from private companies. In fact, I haven't done one as a public company, but I've saved a couple of public companies by being bought back in, including this one to some extent. So I know what I've got to do. I've got to get it right, and I've got to get it done on time. That's the construction and the production once we make the rules. So there is a lot of things the governments can do to help us, like the preliminary work that needs to be done, like water pipelines, camp and stuff. If we can get some help for that, so that when we push the button and get the finance, and we push the button, you can actually start construction and mining, rather than get the finance and then realise that you've got to do all this 6 months, 9 months, 12 months preliminary work, and then just trigger your construction. And in fact, I've been working with construction companies or control companies overseas, one in particular, and we were, as part of the feasibility study going to have to pay millions of dollars for the preliminary order of the crushers, of the grinding mills. And now I've got an agreement where the company that manufactures them is going to manufacture them for us and park them up, and I'll pay for them when I'm actually ready to pick them up. So I've actually moved in, and because of my previous contacts with a lot of these companies, been able to manipulate things a little bit, so we're paying less up front. But the same thing could happen with a bit of government assistance, because a lot of the preliminary work we do is kind of public work to some extent, like roadworks, water pipelines, cleaning up some of the old, because our mine and all our plant and stuff is actually going on top of preliminary mining processes. The place is generally quite a mess from previous work that was done on site. In fact, we're right beside a 1980 lead zinc mine that was there, and they've left everything from the process plant to the tailings dam. It's all still there, and that was basically, they went broke in 1980. There was copper mines there in 1950, 1951. So there's 3 old process plants. So there's a fair bit that could happen with respect to government support that could knock off the preliminary work, so that when we actually it wouldn't make much of a saving, but it does make the financing more positive with respect to the fact that we a better chance of meeting our 18-month construction period, because we can start construction once we get finance.
So what's the current timeline? Obviously, has got a prudent, I hope it's got a prudent buffer in there for getting all the permits and the water pipelines and the roads and all the civils aspects, the infrastructure aspects completed. So when you talk, there's a kind of an 18-month period of construction, but there also must be a buffer for getting the permitting done. What's the
we can cover for it, but it's just more expensive to run it all up. And we would have to, well, as you probably know, when it comes to financing, I've always used 60-40 as what I've had to do to borrow, put 40% equity in and 60% borrow. So I would suggest today, though, it's more like 50-50. So what would mean is that the equity component would have to come in earlier than the process, which with respect to our major shareholders, who I know quite well, is quite possible.
And you're saying that if you get the government support, then you could do both at the same time, because the debt side would be ready.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And what's your aim for copper production? Here we are in the middle of 2023.
Well, that's when the projections for the highest price, so that would be the best goal. But I expect that the target's definitely 2023. I would be very disappointed if we don't make that, even if it's towards the end of it. But that is the goal, correct?
Sorry, the question is, when do you aim to be in production? So are you talking 2 years away or 3 years away or more?
2 years away, yeah.
Okay, so production at some stage in 2025?
Yeah. Yes, sorry, I thought you talked about the start.
Okay, no, interesting. That's good. And quite often on these projects, it's easier to get finance when the NPV is greater than the capex figure. When the NPV to capex ratio is above 1. In your base case, it's not quite there. It's the NPV is 240 odd, and your capex is 298. Do you see that as a challenge?
Oh yeah, most definitely, and that's why we've been doing the optimize. Part of the plan for the optimizing is to make it more realistic, and of course, it was only, when was it, yesterday or today? I read something about the projection for exchange rate, and with respect to the Australian dollar dropping down to 40 cents or something. So wouldn't need the copper price to go up if the exchange rate comes down. But we are doing a lot to reduce the costs, but at the same time, because of what's going on time-wise, you've got to do that because a lot of the other costs are still going up. However, they do seem to have levelled out a lot more now. They're certainly not as bad as when we were doing the fees. So things may have levelled a little bit more.
Where are you seeing inflation still as a factor?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not the. I still see inflation going on for quite a while, although the news and some of the experts are saying otherwise at the moment. But I quite frankly don't see that happening, because I think globally it's still going to happen. But part of the inflation will be prices like copper, for instance, and other things going up, because quite frankly, if you look at the cost of mining copper now, it's still controlled somewhat by places like Chile. But I can tell you the costs of mining in places like Chile are going up and up and up. And I don't think they've actually caught up yet with the price increase. So I'd suggest there's going to be some real issues with copper getting more needed, because I think we're going to find some of the other ones going broke.
And is that because there's a non-linear relationship between grade and costs? Because if your grade drops a bit, your costs don't just go up a bit, because it's the grinding and it's kind of the earth moving aspects of it.
Well, you've got to if you're. I noticed that there was a North Queensland exploration company announced they had 1 million tonnes of copper ore, but at 0.25% grade. They've fundamentally got to mine 10 times as much as we've got to mine. And you're right, grind up 10 times as much and process 10 times as much. So one of the big issues I've had in the process of getting my licences, or our licences, was the governments, and in this case I'm talking about the NT, but they're all going to be the same. They want you to make sure you keep your carbon footprint as low as you can. So obviously we focusing on our higher grade, hence we've got our reserve is nowhere near as big as our resource at the moment, and that's because of we're trying to keep the grade up in the actual mining process. And of course, that would put us, compared to that Queensland potential, almost 10 times better off with respect to the carbon footprint on both the mining process and grinding. And carbon footprint, that's why we're now we've done a contract with Glencore to truck it to Mount Isa instead of Alice Springs, which is very similar. Mount Isa is a bit further. But, if we go to Alice Springs, then you've got, nearly a 2,000 kilometre long railway trip to do. And then you've got to handle it at a port and put it on a ship. So, we've done a lot to reduce what would be analysed as our carbon footprint, which is one of the reasons why we do get like local government support, for instance, and local people support.
And have you had inbound from industry? Are mining companies calling you up and kind of inquiring in the data room, or are you just kind of quietly kind of going about your business, or are you scattering?
Now this is my third interview with you, and I think I've only done one other. I am very conservative in this whole process. I guess most of those mining companies would know me and know my record, and the fact is I'm here to get it into production. I'm not just drilling holes to get the value up to sell it. Well, if I was, I'd be doing a lot more advertising, a lot more promotion work, and I'd have brokers working for me and all sorts of things. But the long and short of it is, if the copper price goes anywhere near where it's talking about and we actually get it into production, it'll be a huge investment. And one of the reasons that the major shareholders agreed with me when we first decided that we would focus on a 10-year mine life, get it going, because there's so much potential, not just for copper, but mostly for copper on this site. I mean, we've got a long way to go, to realise what the real... There may be no more there, but when you walk around the big ridge, which is about 12 kilometres, there's copper sticking out the ground pretty well everywhere. And, so there's the structure of that J bent fold and the mineralisation of the copper is such that we very well still might be playing with some of the smaller potential copper deposits. But unlike an exploration geologist, I'm not out there drilling all the hotspots. I've been sticking with building the mine plan and building our current resource since I took over.
and then at some stage in the future, when you're in production and the marginal cost of your every new ton, or the marginal value of every ton is much higher, then you can go after the exploration additions. Yeah, I see that. Good, Denis. Thank you very much. It's been it's always a pleasure talking to you. If you could just summarize kind of what you're focused on now for the next for the kind of the next the rest of the year and into 2022 2024, please.
Yeah, certainly for the rest of the year, we're focused on the cleaning up the project as best we can for least people, like we've done with the mining, for instance, the open cut. One of the optimising, we've used bigger equipment. So I've actually increased the size of the process plant to 2 million tonnes a year from 1.6, because we're going to use bigger equipment because we use less people to do the mining, and now we're going to be focusing on the open cuts first. So what we're going to do is keep focusing on everything we can do to get the price down, to get it financed, to make it solid. And what we've got to do is make sure we get it done on time and on budget, which means it's got to be right and it's got to be done on time. And that's what we're fundamentally working on. And we've made, as I said, we've chosen a mining company, and we've chosen a design, construct and operating process plant. And we're working with them now on the final contracts and the details in it, and they're working with us in a way of optimising to reduce the price as much as we can. And when I say reducing the price, we're doing that really to reduce the amount of labour to try and make things far more certain for us. So that's part of the drive. The other part that myself and the board are working on is, in fact, increasing some of the relevant staff here from this, and you're right, the CEO and the finance director are two essentials, as well as a project director. I want a project director in here to be doing a lot of the groundwork that I'm kind of fundamentally working on at the moment, because sooner or later I do have to retire. I'm certainly getting much older, but and to be frank, I'd like someone working with me on what I'm doing, the optimising and stuff, so that when it actually starts the construction, I don't have to hang around. I certainly would love to again, but my first mine I built, I was less than 40. So I'm almost double that. Long and short of it is, it's finding the right people and optimising the operation in such a way to reduce the cost and make sure we get it done on time. We've got all our licenses, we've got the reserve, we've got the resource, it's all coming together. The copper price going up will certainly make a big difference. And at this point of time, you're right, I have been chased by various people because of the projections on the copper price. And we're one of the few that have got a mine life this long at 2% grade. And our Rockface, the Rockface one, when I joined 7 years ago, they had an open cut there, which I have abandoned. It's not worth it. And the underground wasn't even started. And now its average grade for that open cut's 3%.
Thank you very much. A pleasure as always. Good luck with the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you very much.